Hey YouTube, it's Eric. Good morning. I guess good morning. Just about to hit afternoon here. 11:58. Coming to you live from London, Ontario. Monday, October 5th, 2020. Hope you're all doing well. I'm doing well here. My birthday is actually tomorrow. I'm going to be turning 24. Feeling like I'm getting old, but still have lots of life left. But this video here, I'm going to be highlighting this kind of going to the connections between like the Nazism and the Catholic Church and the Jesuits. But in particular, I'm going to be highlighting this individual, Albert Hartl, because he's a very intriguing figure, because he was a, quote, former Catholic priest in Germany who joined the Nazi Party in 1933 and became the head of the Nazi Church Intelligence Organization. And again, I'm going to show you, this guy reported directly to Heinrich Himmler. Before I go into Hartl, I have this documented on my website. Hitler got his inspiration for the Nazi Party itself off of the Jesuit order. I'm going to show you that in this intelligence report here that was declassified, I think in 2013, that was put together by this military intelligence officer, John Heinig. Adolf Hitler was intrigued, like he was asking his Nazi church intelligence apparatus to get information on the Jesuits' activities in Japan, for instance. You see here, it's on the title of the report: Hartl is a renegade Catholic priest who is active in Nazi church politics for the SD Gestapo and the RSHA from 1934 to 1945. And this guy worked. Hartl would submit reports on the Vatican to Heydrich, Schellenberg, Martin Bormann. And actually, I'll pull out the book later in the video. In the book, The Vatican Papers, which I have a copy of, by Nino Labello, it says Martin Bormann, when he escaped to South America, I believe Argentina, Martin Bormann was dressed in a Jesuit Cossack while he escaped, that being the Nazi Martin Bormann. And Martin Bormann, the Nazi son, of course, became a Jesuit priest. But I think this Albert Hartl was a Jesuit priest, like a rogue Jesuit the whole time. I don't think he left the Catholic Church. It's all laid out in this report, how Hartl modeled his own Nazi intelligence agency off of the Jesuits. And Hartl grew up with the Jesuits. He was schooled by the Jesuits, and his wife was even. This report refers to his wife as a Jesuit nun, which is very interesting. And I found a copy of Hartl's 4 books. He wrote under the alias Anton Holzner, but he wrote a very in particular book called Priest Power, which I'm going to read you some quotes out of. This was a book that Hartl wrote directly to Himmler, like as a report to Himmler, or the book is a summation of his reports to Heinrich Himmler on the Catholic Church. But of course, Heinrich Himmler himself was a Roman Catholic who modeled the Nazi SS off of the Jesuit order. And I have this all sourced here. This came from the book, Walter Schellenberg's book that he wrote shortly before he died in 1956. The original title was The Labyrinth. This reprint was called Hitler's Secret Servants, or this translation, Hitler's Secret Service, Memoirs of Walter Schellenberg. I recommend everyone check this out. But on page 3132, Schellenberg says some explosive things. He says here, and this is Walter Schellenberg. Actually, I got my book here, The American Swastika, open, and here's a chapter called The Schellenberg Conspiracy. And this chapter starts, I'm just going to read from Charles Hyham, The American Swastika. He says, the SS, of which the SD was so crucial a part, always carried with it an atmosphere of the elite in the respect of the people in high places. That respect extended to the Church of Rome, the respect extended to the Church of Rome is illustrated by the fact that in 1946, the Catholic Archbishop of Freiburg, and that's very interesting because this Archbishop of Freiburg, Cardinal Michael von Faulhaber, was the Catholic priest that ordained Albert Hartl as a priest in 1925. Cardinal Faulhaber was a huge supporter of the Nazis. You can read all about that also in Avro Manhattan's book, The Vatican and World Politics. In 1946, the Catholic Archbishop of Freiburg, that being Cardinal von Faulhaber, who you see on the screen, told an American military interrogator that his archdiocese, quote, considered the SS to be the most respectable of the Nazi Party organizations, end quote. So according to this guy, the Nazi SS was the most respectable of the Nazi parties. I'm just going to pull up my live chat here. So, keep that in mind. And there's some very explosive stuff that was said about this guy in the report. I'm trying to show you. This guy actually had a weapons cache full of machine guns and grenades at his seminary, according to Albert Hartl. But this is what Walter Schellenberg said about the Nazi SS. And you see, Albert Hartl reported to Schellenberg as part of his church intelligence organization. You see, according to Schellenberg, the SS organization had been built up by Himmler on the principal order of the Jesuits. The service statues and spiritual exercise prescribed by Ignatius Loyola formed a pattern which Himmler assiduously tried to copy. Absolute obedience was the supreme rule. Each and every order had to be accepted without question. The Reichsfuhrer SS, Himmler's title as the supreme head of the SS, was intended to be the counterpart of the Jesuits' quote, general of the order, and the whole structure of the leadership was adopted from these studies of the hierarchic order of the Catholic Church. A medieval castle near Paderborn in Westphalia was reconstructed and adapted to serve as a kind of SS monastery, the so-called Webelsburg. And actually, I have a video on my channel of the Satanist U.S. Army officer, Michael Aquino, admitting that he actually did a black magic ritual in Himmler's Jesuit Webelsburg castle. Here, the secret chapter of the order assembled once a year. So it was in that Webelsburg castle that Himmler's Jesuit intelligence network would meet each year. Each member had his own armchair with an engraved silver nameplate, and each had to devote himself to a ritual of spiritual exercises, like the spiritual exercise of Ignatius Loyola, aimed mainly at mental concentration. Himmler was born in 1900, the son of a daughter of a Savoyard greengrocer and a former tutor at the Bavarian court. He was brought up in the strictest observance of the Catholic faith, but soon drifted away from the church, possibly out of hatred of his despotic father. Though not until after his father's death did he dare to leave the church. So and Schellenberg also writes here on the same book on page 108 that Adolf Hitler modeled the structure of the Nazi Party off the Jesuit order. Quote, Schellenberg writes, quote, another man who exercised a great influence over him, Hitler, was the Austrian engineer Plassinger. It was from him, Plassinger, that Hitler took the idea of modeling the structure and leadership of the Nazi Party on the organization of the Order of the Jesuits. One sentence which constantly reoccurred in Hitler's speeches was taken from Plassinger, the Nazi philosopher, quote, the Jews are the microbes of pure decomposition. They are only capable of thinking analytically and are incapable of creative thought. Unquote. And if you read Hartl's books that I have linked on my archive.org page, I'm going to put all these sources in the description box after this video. You see Hartl bashed the Jews quite a bit, which is predictable as like a Catholic priest, rogue Jesuit. And actually, one of the most interesting things Hartl says in this report was probably actually that the Soviet agricultural system, the Kolkholtsi, was modeled directly off the Jesuit Paraguayan state, which is being the Jesuit Paraguayan reductions, which is the foundation for communism, which Hartl confirms here in this report. And Hartl actually says that the Soviet intelligence apparatus, the Nazi apparatus, and the Jesuit apparatus is all modeled off of the Inquisition, and are therefore like the same. There's some very explosive stuff in this report. So I'm just going to go through some of this U.S. military, and I'm going to link this in the description, but I'm not going to read all of this because it's 60 pages. So I'm just going to show you some of the Jesuit connections in this report. This is right on the first page that he was brought up in the Jesuit youth movement. And he says right here, while at University of Munich and later he studied at a seminary in Bavaria, Munich, Bavaria. And it's not a coincidence that Nazism started in Bavaria, the most Catholic part of Germany. Just think about that. While at the University of Munich and later at the seminary, the Just prior to his ordination, Hartl was one of the most foremost students and was already publishing scientific treatises in professional journals under the auspices of Professor Geutler. At the Gregorium, Hartl held the office of General Prefect, the highest office open to theology students. In this capacity, he was responsible for the discipline and acted as the intermediary between the director, Professor Weigel, and the theology students. And you see here, while a student, Hartl joined the Jesuit youth movement. Right here. While a student, Hartl joined the Jesuit youth movement in New Deutschland, which embodied the Boy Scout principles of outdoor life on a Catholic basis, and was soon put in charge of the theologians' Fachkraft for all of Germany. Hartl wrote frequently for the publication of this organization. So I'm just going to I'm going to highlight the Jesuit connections in this report, and there's more. There's all sorts of interesting stuff in this report. I'm going to read more passages. You see here, during this early student days, Hartl supported himself by working during vacations. But after 1925, owing to numerous scholarships he received, he was able to devote more time to the Bund New Deutschland. That's like the German version of the American Bund, or the American Bund, fascist organization set up in the U.S. They had a huge rally and at Madison Square Garden and proclaimed the Roman Catholic priest Charles Coughlin their hero. But the new American Bund was modeled up this Bund New Deutschland, and thus Hartl became to know many of the leading Jesuits of Germany. So I think this Hartl guy was a Jesuit. So this report, has all the indications of that. So Hartl became to know many of the leading Jesuits of Germany. And again, there's two German Jesuits at the time that were confessors to Pope Pius XII, Augustine Bay, S.J., and Lieber. I forget that Jesuit's first name, but that's all mentioned in this report. Hartl traveled extensively, visiting almost all important shrines in Europe and all centers of church activity, including, of course, Rome. And actually, so right here, this one Nazi actually accused Hartl of being a secret Jesuit. With Amstaff Müller, the Nazi Müller here. See, Hartl was active in the Gestapo until December 1941. During this period, he came into constant conflict with Amstaff Müller, who suspected of him being a secret Jesuit. Müller suspected Hartl of being a secret Jesuit. That's said right here. This is actually very interesting because then Müller found out that Hartl was caught kissing a young girl. And this report goes into like Hartl was like a sexual deviant, which would make sense, as most Jesuits are bound to their oath of celibacy. It drives them insane. It makes them lash out. Okay. So this talks about how the Gestapo set up like their church intelligence apparatus. He says Hartl states that the purpose of his intelligence service, and that's the Nazi Church SD, was to keep all leading personalities of the Reich continuously informed about the general church political situation in Germany. To achieve this, Hartl saw that he remained in friendly contact with the higher clergy and at the same time organized an intensive network of spies within their ranks. Hartl, who had made an intensive study of the intelligence methods of the Jesuits. And again, this quote's on my website. I have the video on my channel too. This came from a CIA officer, which becomes very, very fitting because the CIA, or the OSS at the time, was involved in bringing all the Nazis to America in Operation Paperclip and freeing all the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials under the oversight of Jesuit priest Edmund Walsh, S.J., who was at Nuremberg in a U.S. military colonel uniform and acting as a lawyer. You see, E. Howard Hunt said that in this documentary here, A Coup Made in America, speaking on the coup d'etat in Guatemala in 1954, and he says that Cardinal Spellman is the head of the CIA. That's what he says. He says he got the okay from Cardinal Spellman. Why is the CIA getting orders from the Archbishop of New York if the Catholic Church doesn't control the CIA? Think about that. E. Howard Hunt says, quote, "We had gotten the okay from Cardinal Spellman to go ahead with this." I'm going to repeat that. We had gotten the okay from Cardinal Spellman to go ahead with this, and I wouldn't presume to trace the lines of authority within the Catholic Church, how they get their information they deal with. We've always said in an admiring way that the Jesuits form the greatest intelligence service in the world and always have. That's from a CIA agent, E. Howard Hunt, who I believe on his confession deathbed admitted to being a part of the assassination team of John F. Kennedy. Yeah, how's it going, guys? You see, so Hartl made an intensive study of the intelligence methods of the Jesuits as the model of the Church SD. More indication that I think he was, a secret Jesuit. You see, Hartl was promoted to the Kirchen referent in the SD Hauptstadt in 1935. He immediately set about building up his intelligence service along the lines of the Jesuit information services. You see, so Hartl immediately set about building up his intelligence service for the Nazis along the lines of the Jesuit information service. More indication that he was a secret Jesuit. And you see, here's Hitler being interested in the activity of the Jesuits. And I read you the quote from Hitler that Hitler himself modeled the Nazi party off of the Jesuit order. Hitler himself was a Roman Catholic from Austria. And if you don't believe me, I have photo evidence on my website from the Who's Who magazine. This was reprinted by the Leo H. Lehman in the Converted Catholic magazine. And I have this whole issue from June 1944 on my website. You see, Hitler a Roman Catholic? Many still doubt that Adolf Hitler is a Roman Catholic in good standing. To prove this, we have several times quoted from the official German Who's Who, which lists Hitler on the front page as a Roman Catholic. In order to convince those who have any doubts about the fact, we reproduce below a photostatic copy of the same fact from the British Who's Who. And you see Adolf Hitler, head of the German state since 1931, Chancellor of the German Reich, Commander-in-Chief of the German Fighting Forces since 1933. It's funny how the U.S. president became Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces in 1933 with the Proclamation 2040 also. You see here, personal commander of the army since 1941, supreme warlord, supreme law lord. You see that? It's Adolf Hitler's Who's Who. Look at religion, Catholic. Religion, Catholic. Actually, I got this book I recommend people check out on my website. Because it's the Jesuit priest who wrote Hitler's book for him, Mein Kampf, Bernard Stampfel, actually got Hitler out of a sex scandal with his niece, and that's all documented in this book here, Der Führer. This was written in 1944, so this was written still at the time when Hitler was in power. But there's a quote here, yeah, right here. On page 632, this is what Conrad Hayden says. For it cannot be denied that Hitler still belonged to the Catholic Church. For it could not be denied that Hitler still belonged to the Catholic Church. In March 1933, it is true that he had demonstratively remained absent from the services of his church. There was the story that in his youth he had spat out the host, but he was on terms of intimate friendship with several Catholic clergymen, such as Abbot Alan Schlattleitner. And this Abbot Alan Schlattleitner is mentioned a few times in this report here. And actually, in this report, I'm going to go into, this report goes into how Heinrich Himmler himself, who modeled the Nazi party off the Jesuit order, had a Catholic priest as his cousin, another man who I suspect was a Jesuit, that being Augustin Patton. And that's mentioned in this report quite a bit. So Hitler was on terms of intimate friendship with several Catholic clergymen, such as Abbot Albin Schlattleitner, former head of the Mass cloister in Prague, who after 1918 had been driven out by the Czechoslovakian Revolution. In his whole being, Schlattleitner was a fragment of that German national dynamite scattered throughout the whole of Central and Eastern Europe. It is possible that his faith in his people overshadowed his faith in his savior. Hitler, who in 1918 certainly still went to confession and communion, is even said later to have received the sacrament from the hands of this National Socialist abbot, that being Abbot Alan Schlattleitner. So Hitler received the sacrament. At all events, on July 1st, 1933, Abbot Alan Schlattleitner, let it be officially proclaimed, quote, Reich Chancellor Hitler still belongs to the Catholic Church and he has no intention of leaving it, end quote. There you go right there. And this book's on my archive.org page. And just, I mentioned another source for the Nazi Martin Bormann disguising himself in a Jesuit Cossack is in Paul Manning's book. What was that book on? Bormann in Exile. Just want to get the title, but I know this book here is on archive.org already. Or Nazi in Exile. This book has this citation about Bormann disguising himself as a Jesuit as well. You see, Hitler was very interested in the activity of the Jesuits in Japan. Wonder why. You see here, interesting. Studentin Dr. Koether, a Catholic priest and a brother of the well-known Jesuit Koether, was one of Hartl's personal advisors on the basic questions of religion. So Hartl's using brothers of Jesuit priests as his intelligence informants. And he supposedly left the church at this time. And I recommend there's very interesting. This report goes into the co-opted Protestant aspect of the Nazi order as well, which would make sense because if you think about the United States, there's huge fascist Protestant preachers like Gerald L.K. Smith, who were allied with Catholic priest Charles Coughlin as well in the National Commission of Union of Social Justice. What a ridiculous thing that was. But the part of this report on the co-opted Protestant preachers is interesting as well. You see Hartl, and he's talking about a Nazi Kappler. And this is SS Stubauf Kappler, was dispatched to Rome in 1937 by Heydrich to establish an office of police liaison in the German embassy. So you see here, Hartl claims he knew very few of Kappler's agents by name. He mentions Dr. Berkner as one of his agents, as well as Engelfried, which might not be his right name, according to Hartl, the private secretary of Friedrich Muckermann, the famous Jesuit, an anti-Nazi Jesuit, Friedrich Muckermann. How hilarious. And actually, there was a Jesuit Muckermann who was Hitler's eugenicist. I first found this out by Leo H. Lehman. It was Hermann Muckermann. And near the Hermann Muckermann S.J., this article here, it talks about it. I'll translate it from his German Wikipedia. You see Hermann Muckermann, German biologist, racial hygienicist, and Jesuit. This guy was one of the leading eugenicists in Germany. I know William Galton, even one of his famous eugenicist books, on like the intro, puts the cover page of Hermann Muckermann's book Eugenic in it. Actually, his brother was Friedrich Muckermann. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, but this guy was Hitler's eugenicist. He became the head of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology. This guy indoctrinated Hitler and like the whole Aryan race theory. A Jesuit priest. How fitting. Hartl states that Engelfried handed over Friedrich Muckermann's, and that's Hermann Muckermann's brother, entire correspondence, as well as his notes and documents of any importance to Kepler. Which makes sense because Friedrich Markermann, as the Jesuit, is working with the Nazis. That's why he handed over all of his notes and documents to the Nazi Kepler. That's why. You see, Hartl's real importance lay in his knowledge of the Catholic world and his ability to obtain information of the use of the Nazis. And actually, it's very interesting because this report says that Albert Hartl, while he was being interrogated, because he was brought in by the American counterintelligence, he was arrested in Austria in 1945, and he was saying to the U.S. interrogators that he wanted to work for the U.S., presumably the CIA, and he wanted to give them intelligence information related to the Vatican. And, it must have worked because Albert Hartl didn't die until 1982. In this report, the interrogator, John Heinig, and I found a New York Times article on him here. Apparently his father, Kurt Heinig, was a social democrat in the Reichstag and refused to sign Hitler's Enabling Act. But John Heinig recommends that Albert Hartl be further investigated for war crimes. And he got off scot-free and lived peacefully in Germany until 1982. Presumably working probably for the Galen organization, which was set up by the Jesuits and the CIA. Because Reinhard Galen was another Nazi and who was made a Knight of Malta right after the war, who came to work for the Americans. You see, Hartl is the prototype of the Nazi SD, the intriguing informant who delights in uncovering compromising scandals. He is entirely without conscience and, perhaps a better term, immoral. Whenever a question of conscience arises in his testimony, he seeks refuge behind the church. He states, for instance, that he might not have had qualms about stooping to intelligence work against the church had he not previously studied the underhanded methods of the Jesuits. Actually, very interesting, just because if you read, this is well documented in Abraham Manhattan's book, The Vatican World Politics, but many lower level Catholic priests were rounded up by the Nazis and sent to concentration camps. Key statement there, the lower level Catholic clergy. And this report here even documents how none of the higher level cardinals and archbishops ever condemned Hitler whatsoever. It was always a low level parish priest who had no power within the ecclesiastical control mechanism of the church. So this goes into now the annexes. And the report ends, you can see here that he recommends, John Heinig says, I recommend that Albert Hartl be further interrogated on his suspected complicity in war crimes. And probably as Knight of Malta, James J. Angleton, who made Albert Hartl immune from prosecution, I guarantee that. I think Knight of Malta, James J. Angleton. You see, Heinig said Hartl wants to work for U.S. intelligence. It is outlined in detail a Vatican division within the U.S. intelligence. His plan calls for 10 or 12 specialists placed throughout the world. They should be men with a sound theological background and education capable of operating individually without the benefit of agents. It sounds like Jesuits. Hartl prescribes for them 2 or 3 years course in philosophy, general abstract sciences, history, art, literature, theology, and psychology. It sounds like Jesuit training. He says that they should be eminent as authors or lecturers on ecclesiastical matters in order to gain an entree into high Catholic circles. Through their efforts, Catholic activities throughout the world would be observed and reported to the division in Washington. Well, I would say, Apollonius, the Jesuits control Freemasonry, and they have really ever since its formation in 1717. They controlled it mainly through the College of Clermont in Paris, France. But the Jesuits wrote the majority of the degrees in the Scottish Rite system. And that's established fact, admitted by Masonic authors like Jean-Marie Regan Nicholas de Bonneville, Albert Mackey, Manly P. Hall, even. I'd say the Vatican was the ultimate victor of World War II, not the Freemasons. Actually, Peter J. Doiswick sums it up really good here in his book here that I found actually in a declassified CIA document, which I've now I edited into single page just to make it easier to view. The Doiswick says here, while admitting that she is the largest spy system in the world, Rome holds that her bishops and her plainclothes agents are ex-lex, that is outside the jurisdiction of the state they live in, and their travel to and from Rome may not be restricted even in wartime. Secret concordats between the Vatican and other states cover these items here defined. Cardinal Francis Spellman, who apparently appointed himself as chief chaplain of all the Catholic forces of the USA, Doiswick says, though he neither has the time nor training for such a full-time occupation and merely distributes cigarettes, not only travels unrestrictedly during wartime, but at government expense. During World War II, when Cardinal Spellman was to fly from Spain to England, Spanish officials prevented him from the last minute from boarding a certain plane and gave the Germans the okay to attack the plane over the channel. By solemn concordat, Roman Catholic Hitler and Roman Catholic Mussolini were in unity and harmony with the Pope. The first dictator, Hitler, was called, quote, the secular arm of the church, while the Pope called the second dictator, Mussolini, quote, the man of providence, end quote. When this man of providence declared war on the United States, he was neither excommunicated nor reprimanded by the Pope, but the Italian church continued to pray for an Italian victory over its enemies, the United States. When Japan destroyed our navy by a sneak attack at Pearl Harbor, the Pope was so sure of an Italo-German victory that he immediately entered into diplomatic relations with their arch-enemy, Japan. While our American soldiers invaded the North African continent in order to find a route to Italy, the Catholic hierarchy of the Allies had tipped off the Catholic hierarchy of our enemies. The Pope had tipped off Hitler, and the German armies were waiting for our boys. The massacre that followed is now history. War crimes investigators, though almost totally censored where the Vatican intrigue is involved, revealed at last this instance of treason. The New York Times reported it as follows. And actually, I have this whole New York Times article that Doiswick is quoting out of on my website. And if you read back to Walter Schellenberg's book I brought up earlier, Hitler's Secret Service, Walter Schellenberg brings up how the Vatican was giving all of the Nazi military information, key military information, to the Allies. So the Vatican was in the middle, completely controlling the entire dialectic, giving the Nazis all of the Allies' war plans and giving the Allies all of the Nazi war plans. The Vatican acted as that intermediary. Here's that article in particular from the New York Times. And I found another New York Times article recently, which Doiswick brings up in this book, about how Catholic nuns were used by the Nazis at extermination camps, and the Catholic nuns admitted to murdering hundreds of people by injecting them with poison and murdering them in all sorts of brutal ways. Here's that New York Times article. And this came from June 21st, 1946. You see, Adolf Hitler was warned in August 1942 through sources originating in the Vatican of the Allies' North African plans, according to evidence read today in the examining magistrates in the case of Otto Abetz, the former Nazi diplomatic representative in France. Would you look at that? They can't make it up. And that's coming right from the New York Times. Doiswick says here, though, this is a key passage here. Roman Catholicism is an international religion. Therefore, in a case of a world war, its members are found among both the Allies and amongst our enemies, and as in the case of Spain, among the so-called neutrals. To allow these members to communicate freely is national suicide. Think about World War I, for instance. You had the Supreme Allied Commander of the Allied forces, Ferdinand Foch, was Jesuit trained, had a Jesuit priest as his brother, and was a devout Roman Catholic, who actually, Ferdinand Foch, after the war, visited Georgetown University, Marshal Ferdinand Foch, to receive a sword of Ignatius Loyola for a job well done and ensuring that hundreds of thousands were slaughtered. There he is, right from the Jesuit Georgetown website. There's Ferdinand Foch at Georgetown for a job well done in the First World War. And now I have this on my website here. The German Kaiser, pardon my cough there. The German Kaiser Wilhelm II, dictator of Germany, admitted in his memoirs on page 211 that the Pope told him that Germany was become the sword of the Catholic Church during World War I. So you have absolute total control on both sides of the conflict, playing a Hegelian dialectic. Total control. Here's the Kaiser says, it was of interest to me that the Pope said to me on this occasion that Germany must become the sword of the Catholic Church. I remarked that the old Roman Empire of the German nation no longer existed and that the conditions had changed, but he stuck to his words. He stuck to his words. Look at this. Why is the well now what I just showed you explains this, or the reason that there's a Roman fasces, the symbol of fascism, at the Washington D.C. memorial for those who died in World War I. And look at this, they have the Great War for Civilization. What Jesuit thought of that to put on the flag. Look at that. That's the Roman fasces. This fasces was used by Hitler, Franco, and Mussolini as official state emblems. And there it is on this memorial for the dead in World War I. The Great Crusade for the Pope, or the Great War for Civilization. Hey, how's it going, guys? Well, absolutely, all roads do lead to Rome and the Vatican. I would say if there is a synagogue of Satan, if you want to take like a metaphoric interpretation, the Vatican definitely is that, or embodies the synagogue of Satan, no doubt. So this part of the report is very interesting here because this is the Annex 1 called the Vatican Intelligence Service, and the Jesuits are mentioned quite a bit here. This is John Heinig again that wrote this U.S. Army report back in 1947. He says the importance attached by the church to participation in lay affairs is well expressed by the Jesuit Friedrich Muckermann, who I told you is the brother of Hitler's eugenicist Hermann Muckermann, S.J. So here's the Jesuit Friedrich Muckermann, who came to the U.S. during the war on a Vatican mission. Oh, look at that. Friedrich Muckermann came to the U.S. During the war on a Vatican mission. And Averman hadn't brilliantly pointed this out in the Vatican world politics. When Eugenio Pacelli toured the United States in 1936, it literally timed up right with Roosevelt being elected. Like, literally. Pacelli came in October and left the U.S. 2 days after Roosevelt was made president. Just a incredible, it's in your face, and the historians rarely see it. You see here in his book, Sacred Spring. This is what the Jesuit Friedrich Muckermann says here. If the church fails to insist upon its claim to totality in all phases of political, cultural, and economic life, but instead withdraws within the church and the sacredity, it will soon cease to be a fighting church and will be nothing more than a deserter. End quote. But here's the Jesuits are mentioned more in this section of the report. The supreme head of the Vatican intelligence is the Cardinal Secretary of State. His deputy is technically the Director of Intelligence. These two men, together with the Pope, are the only persons in the Vatican possessing knowledge of all intelligence material and thus having a clear picture of the global situation. In practice, I guess the Jesuit general might be included in this group. Well, he absolutely is included. The Jesuit general is the head of the the Vatican Intelligence Service. But in practice, the Jesuit general might be included in this group. Among various religious orders, the Jesuits occupy a special position because they do not submit routine reports but are used as special observers. It is the order with the greatest efficiency and militancy, that being the Jesuits. The personnel is chosen with great care and trained with even greater care, each person having, in addition to a good general education, a specific field of endeavor in which advanced studies are pursued. A great emphasis is placed on sociological and intellectual trends in order to develop a sense of future developments. During the past 20 years, Hartl has attended a vast number of international meetings and claimed that at each one there was a Jesuit observer, even at those meetings not concerned with Catholic matters. But, that's the Jesuit MO perfectly to a T. As examples, he mentions the Jesuit Prebilla at the Protestant Ecumenical Congress, Nopal at the International Pacifist Youth Congress, and Prasaria at the Philosophers' Meetings. In cases where it would be inexpedient to use a Jesuit, an observer is sent from one of the other orders, particularly the Dominicans, the Benedictines, Salvatorians, or Styler and Pecius missionaries. Actually, and this part's really interesting here. So this is where the interrogator Heinig talks about Hartl bringing up the accomplishments of the Vatican Intelligence Service during the First World War. He says Hartl does not feel competent to discuss the successes of Vatican intelligence and asserts that he is familiar with only a few positive achievements of that organization. That's a lie. But Hartl, what he does reveal is, very revealing, to say the least. The greatest expert on this question for the period prior to and during World War I is, according to Hartl, the Russian professor Adamov. For the period from World War I to the present day, and that being 1947, Hartl lists the following successes of the Vatican intelligence. Quote, or 1, resumption of relations with the Soviets through the activity of Wilhelm von Braun. 2, establishing contact with Kind Chai Shek through Jacquinot. And this Jacquinot here is a Jesuit priest. Actually, I gotta plug my battery in here. Give me a second. I'll have to move the. There we go. This Jacquinot here is a Jesuit priest. Right here, Robert Jacquinot de Bassange. This is the Jesuit here that was very close with Kind Chai Shek that Albert Hartl was bringing up. Actually, no, I'm just going to, pardon me here just a second. Just going to move the base of operations. Battery's running low. Give me a second. Just going to turn off my screen share. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. I had to move. I didn't realize my battery had like 80% battery before I started this video, but it's an old laptop. It rips through it pretty quick. Here, so it's that the Jesuits. So Hartl says the Jesuits the Vatican established contact with Kind Chai Shek, who was the dictator of nationalist China before the Jesuits allowed Mao Zedong to win the Civil War and come to power through financing Mao Zedong through the Office of Strategic Services. But Hartl says here, close contact The Vatican made close contact with the Oxford movement in Britain, which almost all leading Democratic politicians are connected in some way or another, in which Hartl terms as auxiliary of the British Secret Service. He also suspects that Vatican intelligence intends to use the Oxford movement as the best approach to the UN, the United Nations. Actually, an occulted fact that I'm sure not a lot of people are aware of. Recently, there was a fully ordained Roman Catholic priest who is the Secretary General of the United Nations, that being Miguel Descado, who is the longtime foreign minister in the communist Sandinista government in Nicaragua. Pardon me. But you see Miguel Escado Brockman, this guy is a Maryknoll Catholic priest, and he became president of the United Nations General Assembly in 2008, September 16th, 2008. Talk about that for control. An openly ordained Roman Catholic priest is president of the United Nations. Correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen a Jewish rabbi being the president of the United Nations or a Muslim imam being president of the United Nations. The Catholic priest was. That tells you a lot. You see here, Hartl said 4, the favorable basis for cooperation with America resulting from the close personal relationship between Pope Pius XII and the late President Roosevelt. 5, the contact with Franco and his entourage, I think Francisco Franco in Spain. 6, resumption of relations with the Tibetan Dalai Lama for the first time in centuries. Actually, and here's a Jesuit Dalai Lama connection. I know Alex documented this. And Alex, if you're watching, I'd like to do, I've just been kind of busy. I'll get back to you sometime soon about doing another stream. Here, Alex posted this a month ago. The Dalai Lama visited Jesuit Santa Clara University. Well, it looks like they took down that page. You can find the Dalai Lama visited Jesuit Santa Clara. That's funny how they took that down. You see here, 6 or 7. This one's very interesting because Russia. I'm going to show you Hartl. I mentioned in the early video, Hartl said that the Soviet agricultural system was modeled off of the Jesuit Paraguayan state, or the Paraguayan reductions. But Hartl said 7, the successful experiment of sending Jesuits to join the Russian Orthodox Church and to let them function there as Orthodox priests or popin, and which makes perfect sense because Joseph Stalin was educated by Jesuits in Tiflis at a supposed quote Orthodox seminary in Tiflis, which in reality was a Jesuit seminary. And I have that all. I have Stalin admitting in it, or the quotes from Stalin himself admitting that he was terrorized by Jesuit priests at the Tiflis seminary. Karl Marx was tutored by Jesuits as well, who Stalin's would continue the Marxist revolution, quote unquote. Here's what Joseph Stalin, none other than Joseph Stalin, this is what he said about the Jesuits. Quote, yes, they are systemic in preserving and working to achieve sordid ends, but their principal method is spying, prying, worming their way into people's souls and outraging their feelings. What good could there be in that? For instance, the spying in the hostel. At 9 o'clock, the bell rings for morning tea. And this is Stalin talking about being at the Jesuit-run Orthodox Tiflis Seminary. At 9 o'clock, the bell rings for morning tea. We go to the dining room, and when we return to our rooms, we find that in the meantime, a search has been made, and all of our chests have been ransacked. What good point can there be in that? And it's even admitted right here on the New World Encyclopedia. Stalin graduated from the Seminary of Tiflis, a Jesuit institutions. One of his classmates was Krikor Bedros Agnanian, the future Cardinal Agnanian. So one of his friends at the Jesuit Orthodox Seminary became a cardinal in the Catholic Church. So it's very interesting because Hartl's admitting right here that the Jesuits were infiltrating the Orthodox Church by sending Jesuit priests disguised or sending Jesuit priests into Russia and having them disguised as Orthodox priests. And, the Jesuits, I know they had a special college in Rome that they were teaching Jesuits Russian so that they could do this. The close relationship with Mussolini, De Bono, and Grazzini, etc. 9, the contact with German military intelligence of Admiral Canarius. And this is, if you read Walter Schellenberg's book, it was through Admiral Canarius and Dr. Joseph Mueller that the Vatican was giving the Allies all of the information on the Nazi military advances. Dr. Joseph Mueller, the Bavarian Catholic politician, was working for the OSS at this time while he was a Nazi. The Vatican controlling both sides. 10, the close relationship with high-ranking American officers since the occupation of Rome. Reports from Rome at the time stressed the fact that the British officers were much more reserved and by far not so naive. 11, close contact with Japanese industrialists, with the Bank of Japan, and with the Japanese Admiralty. 12, the close relationship with non-Catholic political leaders such as Churchill, that'd be Winston Churchill. The Vatican has a close relationship with Churchill. The King of Norway and his former exiled cabinet, particularly with the Norwegian foreign minister at the time, with Benez, who was at the same time another form of approach to Moscow. 13, consolidation of Vatican power in South America, Australia, and particularly the Philippines. So this is a very interesting report, to say the least. It was planned, let me see here. So this is plans of the Vatican intelligence. So 1, to increase the intelligence network of the Vatican, represented by Catholic universities in the world, such as Tilburg in Nijmegen in Holland, Calcutta, Bombay, and Trichinopoly in India, Tokyo in Japan, etc. It was planned to staff these universities with as many foreign Catholic professors as possible by sending German Jesuits to Japan, the United States, and Brazil, etc. And actually, it's very interesting because Hartl says here. I think Hartl's gaslighting the military interrogator. He says one of the Vatican's plans was a large-scale attack on Freemasonry. And in Hartl's book here, Priest Power, he says that the church is very close with Freemasonry and uses Freemasonry for its political ends. So. So he's talking about another Catholic priest here, Prelate Paul Baumgarten. Prelate Paul Baumgarten spent many years in Rome at the Vatican, and during World War I worked intensively for the Vatican Intelligence Service. Armed with the special pass of the German High Command in World War I, he toured the various war theaters. He placed his entire war experience, his experience at the Vatican, as well as his secret knowledge of the Jesuit order at the disposal of the SD. From his immensely valuable writings, which contained few current facts but a wealth of basic knowledge on the Vatican intelligence, he received a few thousand marks from Himmler, that being Prelate Paul Baumgarten. At the time, he lived within the area of the SD. And this is where he talks about Hartl's sister. Actually, I thought it was his wife. Hartl's sister is a Jesuit nun. Hartl's sister, who is a Jesuit nun in the Catholic Order of the English Sisters. Yeah, and this actually talks about here how a prelate, Dr. Peter Werhun, is now working for the Soviet intelligence apparatus, and he's a Vatican priest. So this report's very interesting, to say the least. I recommend you go through it all. From a practical standpoint, every Jesuit can be considered to be working for the Vatican Intelligence Service. Repeat that. From a practical standpoint, every Jesuit can be considered to be working for the Vatican Intelligence Service, particularly the experts and specialists among them. The order makes a practice of shifting his people around frequently, and Hartl claims that for this reason, he is not familiar with the present state of the organization. But again, I think Hartl was like an incognito Jesuit, the whole time. Hartl names the following German Jesuits as leading members of the Vatican intelligence: Priswara, Prbila, Hoffman, Manwald, Esch, Nopel, and Bonegas. At the Vatican, the Jesuits Liber, and this Jesuit Liber here was one of Pius XII's confessors. At the Vatican, the Jesuits Liber and Gunlack are particularly known specialists on Central Europe. So here, the Vatican never allies itself with any single power, but associates with the most varied, diametrically opposed power groups. An example of this method may be found in the activities of the Jesuits in the last 20 years, while they were simultaneously courting the favor of Mussolini and Moscow, Japan and Chiang Kai-shek, and Franco and the United States. With Mussolini, and actually in Mussolini's connection, or his personal go-between between him and the Pope, was a Jesuit priest named Father Taci Venturi. So, and it mentions it right here. With Mussolini, it was the Jesuit Taci Venturi. With Moscow, the Jesuit Der Herbingi. With Chiang-Kai-shek, it was the Jacquinot, French Jesuit. In Japan, the ultra-nationalist German Jesuits. A further example of the Vatican method of playing various parties can be readily seen in the fact of high-ranking ecclesiastical officials such as Cardinal Spellman of New York or the Irish Monsignor O'Doherty at the Vatican are said to be extremely close connections with the American Intelligence Service. And I read the quote from E. Howard Hunt. Cardinal Spellman literally was leading the CIA mission. I think Operation PB Success was the code name in Guatemala in the 1954 coup d'etat. So, the America and the Vatican. The Vatican and this part even says the Vatican stands in extremely close contact with the Vatican. And I tell you, if you read Alvin Manhattan's book, he brings up the connection that when Pius XII visited America, this is before he was Pius XII, he was still Secretary of State Pacelli. When Pacelli visited America in 1936, it literally lined up with Roosevelt being elected. And this talks about the Vatican and the USSR. To the efforts of Wilhelm von Braun, a German officer and jurist who was later active among the Negroes of North America in the interest of both the Vatican and the Soviet Union. I wonder if that's this guy was setting up like Black Power movements, or was that what that's? I don't know if that's referring to, but Wilhelm von Braun, a German officer and jurist who was later active among the Negroes of North America in the interest of both the Vatican and the Soviet Union. An initial approach between Soviet diplomats and professors, among them Strojan and Vatican circles, particularly Monsignor Steinman, Prelate Pizzardi, and various other Jesuits, such as Pulf and the Jesuit General Lidakowski, was achieved. They're saying the Jesuit General Lidakowski was in communication with Soviet diplomats and professors, other than the Jesuit General. This initial approach resulted as early as 1921 in a secret Vatican-Soviet agreement permitting a number of Catholic religious orders limited activity in South Russia. Later, the Vatican activity in the Soviet Union was expanded by the Jesuit Bishop de Herbingi, whose work was marked by success and failures in varying degrees. This guy was another French Jesuit here that was making connections with the Soviet Union. Michael de Herbingi, president of the Pontifical Oriental Institute in Rome and president of the Pontifical Commission for Russia. He's right there. He was a leading Jesuit Russian scholar. Preparation for his activity in Russia, the Vatican built up an extensive organization in which bishops and scientists, as well as the religious order of the Jesuits, the Benedictines, and the Salesians, were assigned important special tasks. There you go. The Jesuit General Lidakowski's successor, the Dominican General Gillet, the Archbishop of Toulouse, President, French Ambassador at the Vatican, Martian, and numerous other officials of the Church all became staunch supporters of a Vatican bloc of southwestern European states. This report brings up. This talks about how Himmler and Bormann actually became Hitler and Bormann kind of turned up their ammo against, or turned up the heat against the Church after they found out that in the French Foreign Office, proof was discovered that the German Jesuits had been working with the French Secret Service. You look at that. Actually, in Walter Schellenberg's book, he talks about how there was a plot that the Nazis uncovered where the Jesuits were essentially were committing treason against the Reich, and how they were conspiring with the Poles and the Japanese at the end of the war, selling out Nazi information to the Allies. This is very interesting here. This Bishop Houdal has been mentioned in a lot of books. This Bishop Houdal was one of the leading bishops smuggling Nazis out of Europe into the various rat lines. And I'll show you this here. I put this photo up recently. The Nazis actually had a Roman Catholic priest on the cover of their big magazine Signal. This is the French Roman Catholic priest Jean Mael de Lupe. He was the head of the Charlemagne division of the SS in Paris, or the SS in France when the Nazis were occupying France. There it is right there. So, clear endorsement from the Vatican of Nazism. Hard to find a clearer endorsement, I think. And actually, it says, and the interrogator actually rightly says that how the church is the church could use the probabilism theory of the Jesuits to go along with the Nazi euthanasia programs, which is doubtlessly what they did. But even today, it is possible to prove the right to kill incurably insane, particularly with the probabilism theory of the Jesuits. Hartl claims prior to 1939, his referat in the SD in Berlin had nothing whatsoever to do with Poland. He does remember, however, that at the time the Gestapo was interested in the frequent conferences being held in Poland between German political refugees and Polish Jesuits in Zakopane. Hartl then visited, and he talks about his trip to Poland, and this report brought up how Hartl even visited some Nazi concentration camps in Poland where they were holding lower-level clergy. Again, not higher-level clergy, lower-level clergy. Hartl then visited the large monastery outside Krakow, where he was welcomed with all cordiality. He also paid a visit to the Jesuit monastery in Krakow and spoke with members of the Polish clergy in Częstochowa and Katowice. So Hartl's going to the Jesuit monastery in Krakow on his visits, which more prove, I think, that he was, a secret Jesuit the whole time. The Vatican is observing this development with great exactitude and with great care. Mention has already been made in this report of the fact that the Vatican for some time has been dispatching Jesuits as Orthodox priests into the ranks of the Orthodox Church. Actually, so this part of the report now is actually coming from Hartl's own words here. It says here, so this is an article Hartl wrote called "My Stay in Russia." Hartl actually says that the Soviet system of agriculture was modeled off of the Jesuit state. I'll check the live chat after this because I know I haven't checked it in a while. Here's here. So this is what Hartl said. Very little agricultural land is privately owned. Most of it was grouped together in the Kolkhozy and the Sovkhozy. The organization of the Kolkhozy is a familiar one, for they have been copied from the collective farms of the Paraguayan Jesuit state. The organization of the I'm going to repeat that. The organization of the Kolkhozy, which is the Soviet collective farm, is a familiar one, for they have been copied from the collective farms of the Paraguayan Jesuit state. If you look at that, that's from Hartl's own words here. And this is where he says here that the Jesuit order has the system of the Soviet spying service is very similar to the Jesuits and the National Socialists or the Nazis. You see, this is talking about the system in Russia. If a teacher arrived late to school or made some un-Bolshevik statement, he received a black mark from the pupils, and this mark would be registered with the school principal. The classroom hours were so arranged that the teachers often had 1 free hour between 2 hours of instruction. They were not permitted, however, to utilize this time for themselves, had to sit on the work of another teacher and check on him. The controls in other fields of activity were similar. This method of everyone controlling everyone else in the system of points can be found in just as strict form in the Jesuit order. I'm going to repeat that. So he's talking about the system in Russia. This article that is put in the annexes of this report was an article that Hartl wrote himself. So it's coming from Albert Hartl's pen. It says here, this method of everyone controlling everyone else in the system of points can be found in just as strict form in the Jesuit order. As a matter of fact, the strikingly similarity in the system of the Soviets, the National Socialists, and the Vatican could not be stressed too often. Wow. I'm just going to repeat that there. Hartl says, as a matter of fact, the striking similarity in the system of the Soviets, the National Socialists, and the Vatican cannot be stressed too often. And I believe that was all the mentions of the Jesuits in the report. I mentioned I'd bring up Himmler's cousin. And this was named Dr. August Wilhelm Patton, who is the cousin of Himmler. And I mentioned Himmler, I showed you the quote from Schellenberg that Himmler modeled the Nazi SS off the Jesuit order. You see, with the seizure of power in 1933, efforts were immediately launched to establish a church intelligence system, which Hartl led within the SD in Munich, which at the time was under the direction of Dr. Werner Best. Dr. August Wilhelm Patton, then, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, then Stiff Canifus, an instructor of religion at the Ludwig Realschule in Munich and a cousin of Himmler, was entrusted with this task. Patton had a great deal of prestige among the higher clergy. This is Himmler's cousin, who I think was a Jesuit. Patton had a great deal of prestige among the higher clergy, being related to the Archbishop of Bamberg. Dr. Bach also had access to those circles close to the German episcopate. So during his period of activity in Munich, which according to Hartl lasted in 1937 or 1938, Patton, Himmler's cousin, was considered the best reporter on church questions, which again makes perfect sense. He's hit the whole, the Jesuits were running the whole show in the Third Reich. So of course Himmler, who modeled the SS off the Jesuit order, his Jesuit priest cousin is going to be the best reporter on church questions. This was particularly true in the years prior to 1936, when the general church intelligence system was still in the initial stages of development. Through his intimate connections with the higher clergy, he succeeded in obtaining confidential material for the SD, some of which might have been revealed to the lower clergy. He also kept the main office of the SD in Berlin informed of all the speeches of Cardinal Faulhaber or other leading church personalities gave before private meetings of Catholic priests. And this is where I mentioned how Halber had a Cardinal Faulhaber, who said the SS was the most respectable of Nazi organizations. Here's a photo of him here. He had a stash of munitions and ammo at his seminary. And Hartl says that right here. He says, so this is the footnote here in the report. As far as Hartl knows, Faulhaber never worked officially for the SD, but he must have known that Patton, that being August Patton, Himmler's cousin, was active in it. Faulhaber was considered to belong politically to the extreme right wing of the Bayerische Volkspartei or to the Bayerische Kongsbund. He's said to have adhered to these convictions even after the seizure of power by the Nazis. I'll repeat that. He is said to have adhered to these convictions even after the seizure of power by the Nazis. While working in the Archiepiscopal Student Seminar in Freiburg, or Freising, from 1919 to 1923, and later from 1931 to 1934, Hartl found out that in the student seminar, as in the Archiepiscopal Clerical Seminar, a considerable quantity of weapons and ammunition was being kept hidden with the permission of Faulhaber. Let me repeat that last sentence. A considerable quantity of weapons and ammunition was being kept hidden with the permission of Faulhaber. Hartl was told this by the seminary director, Rossberger. There were rifles, machine guns, and 2 small artillery pieces. Hartl states that he saw these weapons himself. Some of them were stored in a secret hiding place in the Archiepiscopal Clerical Seminar, which could be reached by a hidden staircase located under a stone slab near the main altar. These weapons were used for secret military exercises. Thus, in Hartl's opinion, Cardinal Faulhaber aided in making possible the rebirth of militarism in Germany. Very interesting to say the least. And again, supposedly this report says Himmler's cousin Patton abandoned the priesthood like Hartl to join the Nazi Church Intelligence Service. And see, this part's really interesting here because I saw this also brought up in Kevin Coogan's book on the Jesuit-trained neo-Nazi Francis Parker Yockey, devout Catholic as well. That being Yockey. This is here. It says Himmler was not idle in his efforts to smear the church. On investigation of his cousin, SF Stubath and Oberregrat and AMT Division 4, Dr. August Patton, he established a secret research office to explore the methods and extents of the medieval witch trials. At the cost of quite a few 100,000 marks, Himmler commissioned a large number of experts to collect all the books and records, printed and unprinted, from all libraries in Germany and from all church and state and private archives. For every German family and for every German community, a list of forebears was drawn up from the archives who at some time or another between the Middle Ages and the present had been martyred or tortured by the church. Hartl states that this material forms one of the most interesting cultural historical collections in the world. Actually, in this part here, it says that the Nazi concentration camps were modeled off of the Roman Inquisition. It literally says that here, from the result of this research. The result of this research project fanned the hatred and revenge of high-ranking party leaders such as Himmler, Hitler, and Bormann. I mentioned Bormann disguised himself as a Jesuit priest when he fled Europe and inspired them cruelties and brutalities against the church. Himmler and many around him copied almost every detail of their concentration camp methods as described in the current press from ecclesiastical interrogation methods of the Inquisition. Wow. You really can't, what a statement. Himmler and many around him copied almost every detail of their concentration camp methods as described in the current press from the ecclesiastical interrogation methods of the Inquisition. Did you look at the... Yeah, how's it going, guys? Hope you're enjoying the video. Yeah, actually, the channel Muzak is a good channel for information regarding the Jesuits. I'd recommend people should subscribe to him if they haven't. Absolutely, Carl. The Vatican bishop, that was Miguel Serrando. He was the head of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. He said that China is the Chinese system is the best Catholic system. He said that they most embody Catholic social teaching. I mean, communist China harvest the organs of political prisoners, throw dissenters into concentration camps, execute people summarily. That's the best Catholic system. Which again, which makes perfect sense because you see it just from this video. Even I've covered how close the church supported Nazi Germany. Yeah, so going now, it's just because this has been a long video. I'm just going to show you the book you can read from Albert Hartl on the Catholic Church, the political influence of the church. Because it's very interesting reading, because Hartl's publications. So in all, Hartl has published 4 books, and these books are all here. I found this on Scribd, but this is Hartl's alias was Anton Holzner, but this is called the Hitler's Priest Collection. All the 4 books mentioned in this intelligence report you can read here. But in all, Hartl has published 4 books. His first was called The Law of God and dealt with his own development and final break with the church. His second book bore the revealing title Priester Mocked, and this is the one I recommend you guys read. This is the only one that I've gone through fully. That's called Priest Power. And according to Hartl, is a revised collection of his reports to Himmler on the influence of the Catholic priesthood in Germany. So far, these 2 books have not come into the hands of the interrogator, but copies of his last 2 books, Eternal Front and Master Life, were found in his wife's possessions. And I found this quote in the book, and one of Hartl's, Hartl was, a Nazi, so Um, there's lots of ignorant and arrogant stuff in the book. But for instance, Hartl said, the greatest German of all times is Adolf Hitler. He has demonstrated for a German that the word impossible no longer exists. End quote, end quote. I'm going to say, I don't think I covered this on the show. This is kind of a fun story that shows the church still supports Nazism. Here's an Irish priest, Father Stephen Crossan, who's caught snorting cocaine in a Nazi room in 2016. There you go. There it is right there. And here's the eagle with the swastika in the room where Father Crossan was snorting blow. The Catholic Church, supports Nazism. Why do you think they gave Kurt Waldheim? Why they made Kurt Waldheim an Order of Pius IX? I have that on my website. Kurt Waldheim was actually involved as well as a Nazi in the extermination camps in Croatia, working with the Ustashi as a Nazi. Kurt Waldheim was made a papal knight in 1994. This guy was the head of the United Nations as well. Very general, an Austrian president. How fitting, Adolf Hitler came from Austria. They really can't make it up. It says in the LA Times, Waldheim became an international pariah when his wartime collaboration with the Nazis came to light, but he still gets to become an Order of Pius IX. You see here, it's interesting to note too that Hartl, in choosing a pen name, took the name Anton Holzner. He claims that it is just a coincidence that a well-known Munich author of great merit in Catholic literature happens to bear the name Joseph Holzner. According to Hartl, Himmler forced him to assume a nom de plume for his publications in order to avoid the impression that his books were in any way connected with his official capacity and his official person, and to show that they represented only his private opinion. So, so Himmler is actually. This makes me think, Hartl was a secret Jesuit, because Himmler, in this report, was the one that told Hartl to use the name that he used on his publications. Let me see, 190. Just want to make sure. Yeah, here's the title here: Hitler's Priest, the Anton Holzner Collection. I'm just going to read some quotes from this Hartl's own book that he wrote to Himmler before I sign off, because there's some good insights on the Jesuits as well. You see, and this is from Hartl's book, under 1,000 masks and all disguises one can image, Jesuits have been active in every time. The newer order societies have learned this method of camouflage from them. You see, another method in which the church works is the method of camouflage. The Jesuits have developed into masters of camouflage over the course of history. They are often camouflaged outwardly. In their order rule, it is stated that the Jesuit should wear whatever clothing is especially conducive to the execution of a special task. If it is especially conducive to the execution of a given task, the Jesuit goes about like a fine gentleman in tuxedo and cylinder, as merchant or as sportsman in whatever uniform. Hundreds of examples from past and present can be produced for this. When the Pope once formulated the plan to subjugate China to his power, it sent a whole detachment of Jesuits there. They appeared in the colorful garb of Chinese mandarins, as mathematicians, as engineers, and reformed the Chinese calendar and taught the Chinese how to forge cannon. When the Pope formulated the plan to make Queen Christine of Sweden Catholic, he sent 2 Jesuits to Sweden, who officially visited Sweden as Italian nobles for the purpose of study. The Jesuit Possevino traveled disguised as a noble, dagger at his side, double-pointed hat under his arm on secret papal assignment, and the Jesuit Abraham de Georgis presented himself as an Armenian merchant. You see, another method of church politics is the method of adaptation, which in the theological vernacular is called the accommodation method. The church here bases itself on the words of the Apostle Paul, who in one of his letters said, "I have become everything to everybody." By this method of clever adaptation, the church overcame ancient Greece. By this method, it annexed the Germanic Middle Ages, simply took over German custom, and then gradually gave it a different churchly meaning. In this method as well, above all, the Jesuits have displayed special skill. Even gone so far that the now famous accommodation conflict, the Franciscans and Dominicans appeared as the Jesuits' most bitter opponents and accused them of treason against the church. The conflict between the supporters and opponents of churchly accommodation went back and forth for over 200 years until finally a pope rejected the Jesuit accommodation method. Only in the most recent times has the church, after an official decision of the papal propaganda congregation, again resorted to this method of Jesuit adaptation. But I'm not going to read all of this here because he even talks about here, he accuses Ignatius of, he brings up the quote where Ignatius Loyola says, "I consider myself lucky if I were a Jew." And he says the church works with Jewry. And again, Hartl was a Nazi, so there's all sorts of bashing Jewry in this book. Not a coincidence that one of the prophets of Holocaust denial, Austin J. App, was educated at a Roman Catholic seminary and then taught at Jesuit University of Scranton and Roman Catholic LaSalle University. That being Austin J. App, the prophet of Holocaust denial. And I recommend you check out this especially the chapter where Hartl goes into the psychology of the priest. I thought that was very interesting. Here, they want to become the elite troop in the world clergy under the leadership of exceptional Jesuits. So he's talking about the young ambitions of the priest. Yeah, I think I'm going to, actually, there's one more thing I wanted to show you just regarding to the Jesuits. I found this in a OSS report. Where was that here? Yeah, this was about a Jesuit priest, Joseph Codd. You can see this is declassified coordinator of information, OSS commentary on the Four-Power Pact, anticipated military situation in Europe following the collapse of Hitler's regime. This goes into how a Jesuit priest, Joseph Codd, was very close with the Archduke Otto von Habsburg. Otto von Habsburg, a famous papal knight. He had like 10 papal knighthoods. He was a huge figure in the Bilderberg group. Otto von Habsburg, at one point, the Nazis with the Vatican were thinking of putting Otto von Habsburg as like the head of like a European Union of states. They wanted to recreate the Habsburg Empire. Great information on that in Albert Manhattan's book, Catholic Imperialism and World Freedom. But this is just from an interesting OSS memo here. Just brings up the Jesuit, how you'll see what I mean. But a newspaper correspondent referred in conversation today to one or more articles which were published in the Washington Daily News about 7 weeks ago under the name of Evelyn Peyton Gordon, a social columnist. These articles related to the Archduke Otto of Austria, who was again a huge Nazi Vatican papal knight, much like how Prince Bernhard, a Nazi papal Vatican knight, was also involved in creating the Bilderberg group with Otto of Habsburg of Austria. And a Jesuit priest, Joseph Rettinger, was the official founder of the Bilderberg group, and I have his memoirs on my archive.org account, where he actually admits to meeting the general of the Jesuits, Liudowski, in a secret room in Switzerland, Zurich, Switzerland. These articles related to the Archduke Otto of Austria and were depreciatory in tone, purporting to show that Otto had at first moved among the most respectable elements in Washington and then had rather quickly descended the social ladder. I know, actually, I'm pretty sure Albert Manhattan said that Otto Habsburg visited J.P. Morgan, actually, in the United States. Very interesting, to say the least. J.P. Morgan was a knight of the Maurice and St. Lazarus. Um, he died in Rome, coincidentally. And it was Edmund Paris's book that cited that J.P. Morgan's um, conglomerate was used as a Vatican financial operator, essentially. That comes from that comes from Edmund Paris's book, The Vatican Against Europe. The newspaper correspondent in question expressed the view that these articles had been inspired by the Reverend Joseph Codd, a Jesuit priest thought to be of Irish background, with whom Otto Habsburg was at one time intimate. Well, doesn't that make a lot of sense? Joseph Codd, Jesuit priest, intimate with Archduke Otto von Habsburg. Father Codd, according to the newspaper correspondent in question, lives in an ample way and strives to maintain a political salon. He was previously pro-Franco, and he is, quote, anti-communist. But you see, the Jesuits created an ultimate Hegelian dialectic. They created communism, and then they created the militant anti-communism. With Jesuit priests like Edmund Walsh being a perfect example of that. It was reported that Joseph McCarthy was educated by Jesuits at Marquette, who led the famous communist witch hunts in the 50s. It was reported at one time that the Empress Zita, and look at this. It was reported one time that the Empress Zita would come to the United States and live in Father Codd's house in Arlington, and that Father Codd would be the royal chaplain. And this is Empress Zita of. I had this tab open. She was she's like Austro-Hungarian monarchy. She's a Bourbon. Zita of Bourbon Parma. So this Zita was going to live with this Irish Jesuit priest in America. Under these declassified OSS files. The Jesuits are the greatest. They're the biggest intelligence service in the world. It's silly to deny that. If you look at that, and there it is from the OSS document. It was Father Codd, according to the newspaper correspondent in question, lives in an ample way and strives to maintain a political salon. He is previously pro-Franco, and he is anti-communist. It was reported at one time that the Empress Zita would come to the United States and live in Father Codd's house in Arlington, and that Father Codd would be the royal chaplain. Absolutely, Jesuit Hollywood. If you haven't read the article, I've got this all documented. The Jesuit priest who wrote the Hollywood production code, his name was Daniel Aloysius Lord. Daniel A. Lord, S.J. This is him here. There's a photo of him there. And you can see the quote from his book where he talks about how he was glad that, you see, this is a quote from Daniel, the Jesuit of Hollywood's own book, Daniel A. Lord. My own connection with the code was kept almost unexplainably secret. It surprised me little that none of the gossip columnists of the day made it a point. I was much relieved that bigotry got no chance to scorn the code because it was the product of the Jesuits. Look at that. I think I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. I wanted to tie in just that this video on Albert Hartl kind of branched out into the Catholic Church's support of all sorts of totalitarian government. But here's Albert Hartl here. This guy's a very intriguing figure because he died. He didn't get tried for war crimes like the U.S. military interrogator John Heinig suggested. He ended up living freely until 1982 in Germany. I don't have proof at the moment, but I bet this guy was working for the BND, or the Gehlen Org, which was the West German intelligence service founded by Reinhard Gehlen, the Knight of Malta. And the first chancellor of West Germany was another Knight of Malta, Dr. Konrad Adenauer, the former board of directors at Deutsche Bank. Konrad Adenauer. Actually, there was a connection from the Cardinal Faulhaber right here to Deutsche Bank that I put on my channel, or put on my archive.org, Eric Bowman 77. In this article from the Soviet New Times called the Wall Street Ruhr Alliance. It brings up how the Vatican is very close with Deutsche Bank through Cardinal Adenauer, who is a Knight of Malta. Here, right here, Deutsche Bank. Its directors have traditionally. It's talking about the Christian Democratic Union, how the Deutsche Bank is the financial bank for the Christian Democratic Union. Its directors have traditionally maintained close connections with the Catholic clerical element in the Rhineland and Bavaria. The forces grouped around Cardinal Faulhaber and Frings and were thus censored, or thus ensured direct contact with the Vatican. So I recommend people check out this, especially the book Priest Power here by Albert Hartl. But check out that whole U.S. military report, 63 pages, and it becomes pretty clear that the church, was in control of the whole situation at the time if you go through that report. Yeah, but here's the book here, Priest Power. This book was, or Priest or Mock was the original title. And I recommend you check that out. Yeah, I think that's all for today, guys. And if you want to get the documentation on one of the early prophets of Holocaust denial being connected to the Jesuits, I got that up right here. A Knight of Malta, Franz von Papen, was Hitler's vice chancellor, just like how a Knight of Malta designed the U.S. Pentagon, John McShane. The Vatican plays both sides, like Peter Doiswick brought up in the quote I read earlier in the video. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely, this Albert Hartl character is an individual that should be studied more, because his relationships kind of show how the intricacy of the Jesuit intelligence network operating at this time. I think that's all, everyone. Peace and love, and Nam Nost. I'll catch you on the next one.